broadcasting from across the North American continent of the Terran Empire, bringing you our unpopular Star Trek opinions since 2020. This is Code 47.
And we are back again, ladies and germs. This is the Code 47 podcast on the Secret Friends Unite podcasting network. I am your host, your humble servant, Trek Lord of West Michigan, Captain Charles C. Carden of the USS Grand Petoskey, a chapter of the Star Trek International Fan Club based here in exciting Grand Rapids, Michigan. And with me, I would say, as always, but actually, this is going to be for the last time for a little bit because I know he's rubbing the tears from his eyes, which I totally understand. I mean, working with me it's pretty fantastic experience. I get that. But I have my cohort, Peter Stein, who is completing his first leg of being the shared co-host of our program. Peter, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Yeah. So, yeah, Peter will be gracefully stepping out for about a month while my partner Katie Q steps in as she is my TNG designatee, as we're going to be taking on Star Trek: The Next Generation Season 2, a season of varying quality. But speaking of varying quality, we will actually be wrapping up talking about the second season of Star Trek, the original series, within this episode. So, but as always, without further ado, we always like to kick off, and it's kind of a double clicker here. So we always try to click off, stealing a bit from SFU Prime, where we have a comic book cover that matches the number of our episode. I did the same, finding an old VHS cover of the original series, and this is weirdly enough in season 3 of TOS, but this is the episode 62 was "Is There in Truth No Beauty?" There's a lot going on there, but I liked the picture of Kirk with his hands out, and I'm trying to figure out if someone doctored this image. It looks like he's got his hand stuck out, kind of like in a fisheye lens. Did somebody slap something in his hand? What is that supposed to be?
That's the visor, because that's the Medusa.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, so this was the Medusan. This is the character or the alien race that so hideous that you couldn't look at them with your naked eyes or it would blind you. And then they ended up finding their way back into continuity with something recently. They were a character on Lower Decks or something, and they were.
There's a Medusan and Prodigy.
There's a Medusan and Prodigy. Oh my goodness. And we're going to talk about that as well. Shame on me. But yeah, any Medusan has to be in some kind of an apparatus or a doodad. And the one in Prodigy is in a floating Dr. Ball spacesuit, for the medical torture droid from Star Wars, Dr. Ball, which was dubbed on Robot Chicken, if you remember. So but anyway, yeah, that originally aired on the 18th of October back in 1968. The third final and somewhat much maligned end of TOS.
Yes.
Oh my goodness. So anyway, moving on. We have since our last, because we recorded, I think we recorded on a Thursday, or we recorded too soon for both of us to have watched. So we actually have 3 new segments to talk about in this episode. So we have 2 segments of Discovery, and then we have the wonderful return of Prodigy, which we just got this past week. Prodigy is going to be back on the airwaves in February. Katie and I will be continuing to talk about that in our next episode. But the Discovery is they're on a little vacation. They had a mid-season finale, which again was kind of sprung on us as a surprise, but we're rolling with it. So Peter, without further ado, talk to me about season 4, episode 6 of Star Trek Discovery.
All right. Episode 6, titled Stormy Weather. So, on their quest to seek answers about the DMA, the Discovery ventures into a subspace rift created by said DMA. In the meantime, during this whole situation, Book faces a strange visitor from his past.
Righty, rude. Yeah, so we had a definite A story, B story happening. Thoughts about this?
I thought it was interesting having Book's dad show up. Mm-hmm. It was they didn't play it the same way that they normally do when this sort of stuff happens. Because this was definitely more of the, oh no, he's actually here in some way,
Right.
rather than just a hallucination. Like normally it's just like your subconscious talking to you
Right.
when they do this, but this is the way that they do it. It's very clear that this is a different entity
Right.
than just Book's subconscious. So I thought that was interesting, a little bit of inner conflict being brought out and then resolved. So,
Gotcha. No, I agree.
so the B
I
story was interesting.
Yeah, I think so too. The A story, I mean, really the A story and the B story, though you said, there were some notable tweaks with how this was different, obviously, with those from Kwai-Jan and Book's race. Um, the A story had a lot of kind of sameness to it. And as we say in our intro here, spreading our unpopular opinions, I'm not super fond of Adira and Gray. I found them both super
I
off-putting and annoying in this episode. And
Oddly, I've been finding them kind of irritating this
I
season.
yeah, I guess and maybe this is the fact that they're so young and they're so contemporary, and I'm old and not contemporary, though I do appreciate the show. But it has nothing to do with the transgendered natures of the characters at all. I just find them to be really not very impressive actors. They're just not really doing it for
I think some of it has to do with just how the characters are written.
me. Mm-hmm.
And I think for you and I, at least, some of it may just simply be that the way that they speak
Mm-hmm.
is just
Very Gen Z.
off-putting.
Yeah, very, yeah, exactly.
Because it's not, um, at least for me, growing up with Next Generation and Deep Space Nine,
Right.
I'm used to a little bit more um, higher level of dialogue, in the sense that you'll use larger words, you'll use more complex sentence structure,
Right.
and that sort of thing. And they don't really do that. And I understand it's like we're trying to show they're young, but even Wesley Crusher did that. And I know
That was
Wesley gets all sorts of bad rap, but
Yeah, that's exactly where my thoughts went with this too. I was thinking about Wesley, because Wesley, even though he gets the worst rap, people really blast on him. Um, he still talked normal, and he still behaved in a way that just didn't quite seem so. I don't know. I mean, I was a teenager at the time. TNG was new, and I was a teenager. I watched it when I was in high school. So in some ways, I really clicked with him. But it's funny because when I started watching the show as a regular viewer, he had already departed after early in season 4.
yeah,
Because it wasn't really until seasons 5, 6, and 7 that I was a watch it every week and tape it and study it and stuff. And then I went back over time and taped the older episodes because they were on in syndication and this and that. So yeah, I just I get the characters, I get why they do what they do, and
I
as
think
a
part of it is they're also they're taking the two of them in tandem to replace Tilly. Is
right,
what I read as what they're doing.
which is,
And
as we've discussed, I had my fill of Tilly
yeah,
without a doubt.
and I think that's part of it, is they're taking that writing style and putting it on the characters, because like Adira didn't behave like this in the previous season.
Right.
She was a little bit more uh, I don't remember the right term, but a little bit more reserved, I think.
Right, exactly.
Um,
Yeah, she was being introduced, and she was, a little bit more kind of fine. And I mean, and that character went through quite a transition as well.
yeah,
Being that she was, the mixed up Trill, and figuring out why she was seeing Gray. And but yeah, I just the two characters are just not
yeah,
doing a bunch for me. I liked, the Discovery crew, having this, like, oh man, I want to get going. Let's do this thing and
yeah.
let's do that thing.
Yeah. I did think it was
It's
funny how this bit in the DMA, it reminded me a lot of an episode that we talked about a little bit ago for TOS.
the amoeba, the one
Yeah,
with the big amoeba. Well,
yeah,
and it really also reminded me. I started watching ahead TNG episodes, and the where Silence Has Lease, or early in
mm,
season 2, was they get stuck
Nagilum.
in the rift with Nagilum, and so this I was kind of like, oh boy, space anomaly and this and that. So anyway, in summary, not the greatest segment with the A story. I found it kind of annoying, but I enjoy Book as a character, and as we're going to talk about in the mid-season finale, going to become quite a pivotal character. So, moving on to see episode 7, but to connect, Peter, please.
All right. Tensions rise as representatives from across the galaxy gather to confront the threat of the DMA. And on the ship, Zora's new sentience raises difficult questions.
Indeed, yeah, we had a lot going on this, including kind of Easter egg haven with the big intergalactic powwow at I think Federation / Starfleet headquarters. I know that
Yeah.
it's been not really quite identified, but this kind of great multi-tier. They're in the big circle of trust that's like 3 or 4 levels deep. That's basically the assembly of the Federation. And I was thinking about the stats when we started in season 3, and Discovery arrived here in the 32nd century. The Federation itself was really fractured. It had fallen from its peak of 150 some odd member worlds back in the TNG time to about 30 or 35, and they're up to about 60 or 65, I think it's said.
Yeah, the Federation's
in
growing
this.
again.
And this is after a year's time of Discovery bopping around and helping reconnect people and giving out dilithium and this and that. So Discovery kind of single-handedly saving everything. But yeah, it was really cool to see this big assemblage. But yeah, the big Easter egg was when they're performing the vote as far as what to do about the DMA, because our mysterious stranger, whose name is now escaping me. What's the name of the guy who's the big arrogant science jerk?
Oh, dang it. Let me quickly check. I
know,
can't remember his name either.
It was funny as I was watching.
I was like, it's Kovich, but it's not, because that's the guy with the glasses.
When it jumped out at me, I'm like, oh, this guy looks really familiar. There is a big correlation, and I bet you could Google it and find a nice solid list. The old Fox show 24, which I absolutely love, with Kiefer Sutherland, which was on the early 2000s. He was how many Star Wars or Star Trek to 24 crossover actors there are. This guy was one who was at the beginning of season 4. He was in it for like a half an episode, and he was with Jack, and then he got shot and killed. So, but I'm like, but that guy really jumps out at me. As he jumped, it was so dumb because in that episode he jumped out from behind a car and like got shot right in the sternum and died. So really memorable role. Is it Tarka? Tarka.
Yeah.
Tarka is his name. So yeah, he's like, well, I
find it.
And he's this mysterious character, and the way he ultimately sways book at the end of it is, I'm from another universe and blah blah blah, we're trying to get rid of this thing, and you're just not getting the vibe still that he's really on the level. But anyway, as
still thinking
I often
through his teeth.
Yeah, exactly. As I often do, I've kind of gotten off the path. The big Easter egg that I loved, and it's been subsequently analyzed on Twitter, and I think I've done some retweets myself, is that you had the big display when they're doing the vote of member world logo. So you've got this and that. And I think one they snuck in was like the Zindi from Enterprise, which I thought was awesome. And
I was looking at him. I just haven't done a screen grab analysis of it.
The president does. The president, who herself is a Bajoran Cardassian human heritage, which is just crazy. But they mentioned that, we have representatives from all 4 quadrants here. So do we have the Dominion in there? Or is there a Vorta there by any chance?
I'm guessing that we have the Dominion at least present. I don't think they're part of the Federation, but I would imagine they're there.
Right. But, and again, I'd have to, this was not an episode I watched a second time, but, was this just a gathering of the Federation? Or was this a gathering of spacefaring worlds? It seems like it was probably
it seemed to be spacefaring worlds.
Yeah,
in part because Earth was there and Earth wasn't part of the Federation.
Very true. Yeah, the Earth Defense Force, which she jumps in and she says, yeah, since the president or the senior military officer, General such and such, again, not always the best with names on the first pass, but she says, yeah, our organization has grown, a Titanus member of our organization now. And we're like, well, we'd love to have you back in the Federation. And she's like, well, I guess we'll just kind of see what happens.
Think about it.
So,
One
yeah.
thing that I thought was kind of fun as just a aside was in the gallery, we saw a Cardassian.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is the second time we've seen a Cardassian in Discovery. The first time was when they first got to the 32nd century.
Right.
And I just have to say this. I'm happy that they didn't change the design because
I haven't taken a close look. So
they tweaked it a little bit, but it's not one of those like it's really, really noticeable.
Right.
I'm a big fan of like minor tweaks. If you're gonna do
and it's like the Ferengi. Okay, 1,000 years have passed, and so this one, their ears are different or whatever it is, and you can imagine
I think
the
this Ferengi
Ferengi.
his mother's just a Zakdorn or something.
Yeah. Oh, there you go. Well, they caught a side glance of a Ferengi, and you definitely thought, well, this one definitely looks like it could be the Grand Nagus because kind of dressed up pretty fancy pants. So, yeah, I enjoyed all that. The B story with Zora and her emerging sentience and kind of what to do with it really has obviously smacks of of Data's journey in season 2
Yeah.
of TNG with the Measure of a Man kind of deciding his rights, which is an episode
They worked
that,
very hard not to mention that.
right, exactly. But it's it's a case study in kind of what TNG and Star Trek in general does best is taking social issues and turning them all over. And of course AI, and again, that episode was over 30 years ago, the TNG episode. And this one concurrently, AI continues to grow, and sentience is ever closer, as something that we may really have to deal with in real life. So this was interesting.
Yeah. I thought that the way that they handled this one was interesting, like the way they did it, and how they presented the information.
Right.
Immediately starting with a kill switch was an interesting choice.
Right.
But I think that their ultimate solution, at least for me, felt like a cop-out.
Right.
And I know it sounds weird, but the reason for that is, like, the ultimate solution was, well, Zora's a new life form.
Right.
So the rules don't apply to her.
Right.
It's like Data was also a life form, but also recognized as an artificial intelligence. So you're kind of skipping over one definition to be like, oh, well, it's this one.
Right.
But it's also this. You still have to address that. So, I mean, they did it, but they didn't. And so I don't know if that's just a loophole that they're leaving for it to be a problem later, or they just were like, we solved it, bye.
Yeah, right. Never. Oh, there's never a solution. But yeah, this teed us up for the second half of the season, because in the end, Tarka does convince Book to run off with him to the center of the galaxy with his Destructo device, which they had a nice tie-in back to Star Trek Insurrection with the
Sona.
Yes, and the
Baku.
I just know the device. I had it on the tip of my tongue, and I was looking at
isolatic
weapons banned by the Kidmer Accords for obvious reasons, because you saw in that movie they're super destructive, and they wound subspace. Yeah, right. Which was even something that was addressed in a late series episode of TNG, which was warp drive is cutting holes in subspace and breaking it down, and the reason Voyager had those multi I was going to say geographical, kind of variable geometry in the cells was to prevent that issue. But now we're back to it again, so it's a different kind. So, but anyway, the kind of the outro trailer made it look like, and of course, again, in anything they take all the best bits, but they look like it's going to be a real rip roar, and we got to go stop them, and this thing and that thing, and blah blah blah. But it's funny, Burnham, has really kind of evolves as a character. She's come to the point that instead of being, the cowboy that she was in seasons 1 and 2, and even in season 3, that now Book has kind of taken her role as the, I'm going to run off and do the thing off book, as it were. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's interesting. It's really, I think it's, a fair interest in kind of growth in the character, I think. But we will find out. Discovery does return on February 10. So we will get the final, I'm assuming, 6 or 7 episodes. I'd have to double check to see how many there are left. So anyway, final thoughts on these 2 episodes?
Yeah, they're decent.
Yeah.
The second one was definitely better than the first one.
I totally agree. But anyway, real briefly, because we gotta keep the train rolling. Prodigy returned with its episode 6 of, I'm assuming, 10. And again, I should always, probably do my homework and actually look ahead. But this was the episode, and I just absolutely love this segment. Kobayashi. I'll read the description here. I know this is real tough for me to steal your job. Sorry. As Gwen, who everybody hates, and I know that when Katie comes on next week, she's already kind of chomping at the bit to tear this character apart because she can't stand him. As Gwen struggles. That's
Gwen's
not Gwen. Doll's the character that you love to hate. Gwyn struggles to find her role aboard the USS Protostar. Dahl tests his leadership skills in the newly discovered holodeck in a program I will simply call Kobayashi Easter egg. Because they really knocked it out. I thought that part of the episode was great. I really did love it. So yeah, he quote unquote discovers he and Pog Jacob Pog do quote unquote stumble upon the holodeck. They initiate the Kobayashi Maru program after doing some research and dump some on the bridge of the Enterprise D from Star Trek: The Next Generation. And then they get this fun graph, and it's funny, even in the Memory Alpha article, they have this graph of them like, pick your crew, and you're looking at the different comm badges and stuff and say, pick who you want to pick. And so they end up with a great crew.
Yes.
They end up with TOS era Uhura. They end up with Odo. They have Beverly Crusher at TNG era, which I believe Gates was the only actor who recorded any new dialogue.
Yes.
Because obviously they get Spock and they get Scotty, both of which we get Spock, TOS Spock, and then movie era Scotty. Both actors have obviously passed, so all their dialogue was looped. I didn't hear anything that sounded like an imitation. One thing that I did annoy the shit out of me, because Spock was a character I think that got the most kind of airplay, is that the looping of his dialogue, the majority of it was obviously from TOS because it's the most material to pull from. And they would just pull relevant bits of dialogue that fit what they wanted him to say. But one of the last lines he spoke was a very elderly Leonard Nimoy, and it was really
from
like
2009.
So it was like, but he just said live long and prosper. I feel like they could have, it's kind of two-sided. Maybe they did it because it was
the line was they had him say the whole bit of you remind me of another captain that I used to know.
No. That was I know the bit you're talking about. That was actually from Unification.
Was it?
Yeah.
Okay.
No,
his sounded similar.
The last thing you heard Spock say was simply "live long and prosper," and it was the 2009 dub. That his last on-screen appearance in Star Trek, anyway, was in Into Darkness, which was in 2013. So I don't know. This is something that wouldn't bother anybody but me. But
it did bother me a little bit because they didn't scrub the audio quite the way that they could have, and so you could tell different eras in your ears.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, in your ear holes. There's no doubt about it. But it was wonderful to see all those characters. I always love to see. I like that they picked movie era Scotty, give them Monster Maroon some love. I dug it.
Like Grumpy Odo. That was glorious.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I really bugs me just because I'm not the world's biggest TOS fan that TOS gets all the press and that a lot of the other series just kind of get put on the back burner. You know what I mean? So you don't get a lot of
obsession for the past like 10-15 years.
Yeah, right.
Since the reboots got announced, everyone's only been focusing on TOS. And don't get me wrong, TOS is great, but there's so much more.
I think that there are so much that are greater. And again, we all have our personal kind of perspective based on how we were introduced to Star Trek. And for me, it's always the TNG, DS9, Voyager triad was, my growing up with the series. So, but what I did like about this is that this gave us a great big old Voyager Easter egg at the end. Because as they're, as the crew plus the Janeway hologram are starting to kind of decode the mystery of why they found the ship in the first place at the ass end of the Delta Quadrant, and it's a brand new, totally functional ship, is that as they're breaking the logs down, they find a outgoing log from Protostar's real captain, Captain Chakotay, in another new type of uniform, as a matter of fact. So, oh my God, Peter, we're gonna have to
looked
get
a lot like the Star
cosplay.
Trek Online uniform.
Making that canon, huh? But yeah, we find out in the last glimpse that, and again, we knew that Robert Beltran was going to be returning. He's also going to be with actor David David, I think, from Hamilton and Blackish, if you know the actor I'm thinking of, and actress Jamila Jamil, who was on The Good Place, are going to be two other members of the Protostar crew that are obviously displaced somewhere. So I would imagine that means they have to turn around or something, or kind of decode the mystery of what the heck happened to Chakotay and his crew. But I'm fired up. Of the Voyager characters, I always kind of feel like Chakotay was my favorite, because I tend to gravitate towards first officer characters, and Riker is my guy. And so, but I always really liked Chakotay. I have a Chakotay cosplay. I actually, because I have the jumpsuit, as many people do, but I actually did commission one of my badge and board guy to make me Chakotay's pin. So I do have that, and I have a picture. I think I posted in the past when I was in college. I had a friend who had a family member who was a seamstress. My friend had kind of a Catherine Janeway vibe, so she and I did Halloween one year as Janeway and Chakotay, and she took a a mascara pen or whatever it is and drew the tattoo on my face perfectly. If I haven't shared the
Nice.
pictures, I may go ahead and do that on Twitter when we drop this episode. But that was fun. That was my first real Star Trek cosplay experience. That was back in 1995 when the show was new. Just starting season 2 of Voyager. So I love this episode. You know, it's funny, this summer he started talking about what Gwyn was doing. I don't even remember. All I remember is how great the holodeck thing was, and how close Dog comes to actually beating the Kobayashi Maru, but still fails.
Ejecting the warp core.
I know, gotcha. More isolated, which is not really a solution because you strain the ship and damage the ship. But then, in the end
but
of it,
it's still hilarious.
He still blasts out a torpedo and blows up the Enterprise.
So, I just thought it was great, though. Where it's just like, overload the warp core. I'm sitting there going, okay, what you doing? Eject the warp core. Okay. All right. This is interesting.
Just like an insurrection, you know what I mean? So it's coming back. So given some insurrection love. So I'm excited about this. Like I said, we probably have another 4 episodes before we get back into Discovery. So I'm excited. And again, I love that this show has the vibe to get the young people interested in Star Trek. So I am totally fired up about that. So closing the book on the new stuff. Out with the new, in with the old. Peter, it's your last segment for a while. Sing me the song.
All right. It's been a long road. From there to here.
All right.
Been a long time.
Okay. We are wrapping up season 2 of Star Trek, the original series, with another 6 episodes. Which to my regard, I feel like these are probably 6 of the better episodes of the season, because we did have some not great ones. But I tell you, we're not pulling any punches with the first one. So Peter, go ahead.
Oh yeah, one of my personal favorites. Episode 21, I think. Yes. Of the season. Patterns of Force, directed by Vincent McEvedy. Written by John Meredith Lucas, aired on February 16th, 1968. The crew of the Enterprise visits a planet dominated by a Nazi culture and at war with its planetary neighbor. The Enterprise is visiting the planet of Ecos that is surrounded by Xeon inhabitants. Ecosians are violent and Xeons are peaceful. The Enterprise wants to contact Professor John from Earth, who came here to research, supposedly without interaction. But the planet turned into a Nazi-type colony, hating the Xeons.
Right.
John has apparently become Der Fuhrer of Ecos and leads a plot to eliminate the Xeons. Spock and Kirk beam down.
I said it's not good.
No. Spock and Kirk beam down and try to contact John, but run into trouble and, they get put in jail. The scheme to run out of the jail, they get out of jail with a Xeon and make another scheme to meet John, but realize that John is drugged and Malakon is controlling the entire process. Dr. McCoy is beamed down in a closet and gives a stimulant that finally awakens John, who then explains to Kirk what went wrong with his observation, and then he gives a speech to the people, restores peace to Ecos, and Malakon is put in jail.
So, you're right. Oh my
God.
Peace
is restored.
Boy, I gotta tell you, this is a risky subject matter, and this was only not quite 25 years after the end of World War II to make a story like this. Holy shit! This is I agree with you. This is absolutely, I think, one of the best episodes of the series. It really does what Star Trek does best, which is use that sci-fi lens to look at contemporary issues in society in general. But oh my god. First of all, crazy costuming, because you got a lot of these Nazi uniforms going back and forth, and
Yep. I mean,
Uh,
Hollywood was
yeah,
making a whole lot of World War II movies at the time, so I'm sure they just borrowed a whole
yeah,
wardrobe set
they
from
just they
a
just
John
rolled in
Wayne
a
movie or something.
big old rack of this week's World War II establishment movie. But this episode, I think, had one of the best, and I've heard it referred to in other writings of interactions between uh, McCoy and Spock. As Spock is trying to gently, break the bars, and they're doing some back and forth, and McCoy is just saying, "Well, thank you for saving my life." Well, and then Spock very coolly says, "Well, you're the CMO and whatever," and he's like, "I'm trying to thank you," and "Oh yeah, I know you humans need to do this thing and that thing," and he says, "Look, Spock," he says, "You would know what to do with a warm, genuine emotion if one crossed your path. The real thing that you're more afraid to live than to die, because every day you live is another chance that you're going to screw up and let your human side peek out." And then Spock just turns back, and he has this long, distant look in his eyes. He just kind of absorbs what McCoy says, and that that's really where it's at for him. And then he turns back and says, my favorite Spock delivery, says, "Really, Doctor?" In response, and McCoy just goes, "I know. I'm worried about Jim too." And it was just like, "Aw!" It was a moment between the two characters, probably my favorite, besides McCoy's line in Star Trek 3, "That green-blooded son of a bitch. It's his revenge for all those arguments he lost."
My favorite Kirk McCoy and Spock moment is in 4.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to die to discuss your meetings on death. Excuse me, Doctor. I'm receiving a number of distress calls.
I don't doubt it.
That's my favorite one.
Oh my gosh. Oh, good stuff. So I loved it. So anyway, any other thoughts before we move on?
Other than it's a great episode, and it handles its setting and everything just very, very well.
Right, exactly
Just a good episode.
So I'm excited about this next one for one reason only, and it's not because I like the story, because I really don't. Episode 22 of the season is By Any Other Name, directed by Mark Daniels, story by Jerome Bixby, teleplay by the fantastic DC Fontana and Jerome Bixby. The thing I like about it aired on my birthday 8 years before I was born. February 23, 1968. Beings from the Andromeda Galaxy steal the Enterprise, technologically modify it, and attempt to return to their home. Our gang and a few other crew members beam down to find a few people who ask Kirk to surrender the ship by paralyzing. Then this was the famous turning crew members into a dodecahedron, and they crush the one that's the pretty girl, ouch, who later goes on to be the here's a little nugget for you. Later goes on to star in the sitcom Charles in Charge. In the first iteration, she was the mom. Weird little fact I remember. These people are the inhabitants of the Kelvin planet in the Andromeda Galaxy. They need to travel 300. They need to have it, endure a journey of 300 years in order to get home. Which they modify up the Enterprise so they can do that. And the head guy is Rojan. He controls the Enterprise along with the people and mobilizes the entire crew and turns them into little crusty dodecahedrons. So, once they're aboard the Enterprise and on this journey, it becomes, a game of cat and mouse, as Kirk always does, to, outsmart the villains, which is Scotty gets into the mix and tries to drink one of the other Kelvins under the table, and giving us the famous line, "What is this? What is this?" referring to a bottle of liquor, and Scotty says, "It is green," which he gets repeated to him in the TNG episode Relics, where Scotty is on the Enterprise D and meets the crew. So at any rate, Kirk and Spock do figure out that because the Kelvins have taken on human bodies, they have the same cleavages of emotions, and so they go forward and exploit that. Naturally, Kirk seduces the pretty blonde, and then of course there's a drinking under the table, and I think Spock engages one of the other ones in kind of nervous energy and stuff, and they manage to drive a wedge between them. And in the end, Kirk talks Rojan into settling his people back on the planet where they first met them. So, bleh. It's just, I don't know. I thought it was, I thought it was okay. I thought it was okay. It's wedged between two of the best episodes of the series, in my opinion. So that kind of drives me nuts. But whatever, a lot of a lot of all series is, having filler episodes and ones that just don't really hit the mark. So that's what I guess this was.
Yeah, it's not a bad episode, but it's not
Mm-hmm.
it's not a great one. So
Right. So, but moving on, I'll let you read this, but I will point out that this is April, and I have a list of movies and or TV shows that we watch every 4th of July, and this is on that list. So every very beginning of July, we watch Independence Day, and we watch a handful of I'm forgetting what else is on the list. I have it in my phone because I would forget, but Independence Day. But then we watch this one because this is the good old US of A of episodes. So go ahead.
Oh yeah. Episode 23, The Omega Glory. Directed once again by Vincent McEvity. Written by none other than Gene Roddenberry himself.
That must be why it's so good. Maybe.
Aired on March 1st, 1968. So, Captain Kirk must battle a deadly virus and a treacherous fellow starship captain to stop a meaningless intertribal war. The Enterprise responds to a signal received from the USS Exeter, which is orbiting a planet but not responding to any communications hails. Upon boarding the ship, our gang finds that the crew has disappeared and left behind clothes and a mysterious salt rich in potassium and carbon. Gee, I wonder what that could be.
They're running around naked and playing with salt.
Yep. Bones realizes that this can only happen if the body loses all of its water. Ugly bags of mostly water without water become salt. Ooh, we just saw that two episodes ago.
We just solved that future
actually in the last episode.
So there you go.
Yeah,
right.
Spock plays the last log from the Exeter and finds a message that says everyone is affected by a virus and should not go back to their ship, but beam down to the planet's surface. Upon landing, they find the Exeter's captain, but he is fighting a war with the inhabitants on the side of the Yangs.
Whoops. Not very prime directory of him, directorially.
No. Actually, no, he's fighting with the comms. He's fighting against the Yangs. This is backwards.
Damn it.
Okay, anyway, the landing party is eventually imprisoned, and Bones is instructed to find the cure of the disease so that they can go back to the planet's surface. Or technically back to the ship. Because they think that if you beam up to the ship, you're going to die. Right. There's something on the planet that they believe helps you live forever. They eventually realize that the human body develops antibodies for the disease within a few hours if they remain on the surface, and then they can beam back to the ship. This is a natural thing for the local Yanks and comms, which is why they live so long. Like this, right, the captain is once again seeking a fountain of youth, a la Insurrection. Finally, the Yangs realize that Kirk follows the same book as them. So, Native American literature, the American Constitution, and the flag are eventually brought out. But in order to decide who is right, he makes Kirk and Exeter's captain fight in a trial by combat.
Makes perfect sense. I love it.
Yes. Spock manages to gain the attention of one of the Yanks and trick her into giving back his communicator and beam down 3 security dudes. And they take control of the situation. Finally, Kirk, in one of his most bombastic and amazing speeches.
So good. That's why I like it so much. It's one of my favorites.
It's one of Kirk's best speeches. He tells the Yangs that their constitution is for everyone, including the comms, and they need to try to live peacefully.
Right. I love it. Like I said, it's very obviously this is another example of what we see in the episode Muri, what we see in the episode Bread and Circuses, which was in our last segment, is that we have a world that, with Hodgkin's theory of parallel planetary development or whatever it is, which was the, TOS explanation of why they were basically in these different alternate Earths where this one thing went wrong, and it was just like Earth up until the time that this thing happened. So this was the same thing. They had the US of A, but then there was a huge war and biological whatever it is, and humanity was reduced to basically the cavemen level of technology and communication and whatever it is. And I think Spock refers to quite inappropriately of those of Asian heritage as the Asiatics, which is not something you'd say anymore. But this was the 60s. But anyway, yeah, great allegory to the fact that it is once again a great lens of looking at what we hold of value and how it can be perverted without understanding, which tends to happen in the modern day as well. So the Constitution, as it were. One of my favorites. I love it.
It's a good episode.
You bet. All right. And speaking of my favorites, I really love this next one because this is one of the episodes, probably the episode that had that benefited the most from the 40th anniversary complete remastery of the original series, where we took a lot of these special effects, especially any of the externals of the ship, and completely replaced them. So this was the Ultimate Computer, episode 24 of the season. John Meredith Lucas is the director, story by Lawrence N. Wolfe, teleplay by the fantastic DC Fontana, aired on March 8 of 1968. A new computer system wreaks havoc when being tested aboard the Enterprise. The crew is deboarded onto a starbase, and the new M5 Multitronic system is installed to test if it can control the Enterprise and manage operations aboard. Its builder, Dr. Richard Daystrom, of what, of course, later the Daystrom Institute. So he's the top guy in computer everything for all history in Star Trek. He has brought it, he comes along with the unit so he can care for it. Everything is pretty much going as normal until, they do a mission, and, M5 says, well, I want these people to go, but Kirk picks this and that. And he said, oh, Kirk, Kirk's not essential. That was a big slap in the face. And a little bit of social commentary on how automation changes the workforce and stuff. And they were like, well, they'll never replace a captain in his intuition and brr, brr, brr. Of course, Dr. Daystrom is really kind of an arrogant jerkwad. He just can't, his ego can't handle that anybody would disagree with him about how great M5 is. So M5 starts taking some liberties and turning off systems and doing things a little bit different. They try to shut it off, and who gets vaporized? A red shirt. Ouch. And even then Daystrom's like, well, the thing is, it's like Daystrom
just got in the way.
Yeah, Daystrom can't handle, his ego is so fragile, he's just kind of losing his shit. And that's before we've even gotten in to the meat of the episode, which is the war games. We have four beautiful Constitution class ships led by Commodore Wesley that are subsequently attacked and almost nearly destroyed by the M5.
Completely destroyed. Well, it's not destroyed, but everyone's dead.
Exactly. So yeah, they're reeling up, and beautiful shots and opticals in this, and just really to me, my biggest issue with anything that old is that you can see the model kit swinging back and forth. In the old episode, you can see the wires. One ship gets shot and it goes woo, or at least that's how I picture it. But in the end, my number one favorite TNG trope, executed by Kirk, is when he talks a computer to death, and that's exactly what he does with the M5. M5 realizing it has to take responsibility for the deaths of all of the Starfleet people, decides to deactivate itself so the Enterprise can be destroyed. Kirk is able to get a message out at the last minute so that Commodore Wesley does not, in fact, do that. So I liked it. Again, I like social commentary based around the fact that, the little guy loses his job to a computer, which happens every day in the real world. But of course, in this case, and because it's science fiction, the computer is crazy. So that's what we get out of this.
Well, it's one of the main reasons why, like in Discovery, Starfleet has prohibitions against integrating artificial intelligences into their systems because of this particular episode.
Right, and think about Ron D. Moore's Battlestar Galactica. It was the same thing with the Cylons. They invade computer systems, which led to the wipeout of the 12 colonies, except the Battlestar Galactica, which was an old ship that was not networked, and that's why they lived. So,
which is actually one of the things that I really like about the new Battlestar.
Yeah,
and I've actually applied that reasoning to some of how Star Trek operates to try to explain certain things, especially some of the visual tech differences, especially between Enterprise and TOS. But we'll get there when Enterprise happens.
Absolutely. Well, here, jump into this next one. I'll let you read this, but this was when I actually wrote some fan fiction around. One of the few episodes I tried to continue the story in kind of an original fashion. But you go ahead. Episode 25.
Episode 25, Bread and Circuses, directed by Ralph Sinensky, written by Gene Roddenberry and Gene L. Kuhn. aired on March 15th, 1968. Captain Kirk and his companions are forced to fight in gladiatorial games, well, eventually, on a planet modeled after the Roman Empire, in what is described as a unconventional episode, which makes it so much more enjoyable.
Right.
The trio beam down to a planet to see and understand why a planet lives like a Roman Empire, where slaves are subjected to fight gladiatorial wars. They ask refugee people who have escaped this empire to help them get into it, where they can meet a former captain of a starship.
No, of the space service, not a starship. As he points out, he's not Starfleet.
Yes. One thing leads to another, and all three of them are captured. Spock and Bones are forced to fight, and later, all three of them are subject to the death penalty. Things take a turn, and Kirk, Spock, and Bones manage to get beamed back to the ship.
Big surprise. Yes, I absolutely love this. And again, it's funny, I mentioned it, talked about the previous episode with not thinking about the fact that I made a reference to this episode in the previous description. But yeah, it was the same thing. We had Earth, parallel to Earth in every way, but the Roman Empire never fell. So the Roman Empire culture continued and dominated the entire planet. But we come along to them. They have modern technology, which is the 1960s. So they have TV gladiatorial bouts, and they have automobiles, and they have the beginnings of space travel and rockets and stuff. So, but yeah, I absolutely love this episode. You know what? I'm such an idiot. When the bit about Spock and McCoy I was talking about, that happened in this episode, not the episode I was talking about. Shame on me. Because they're worried about Kirk because he gets separated, and as the pro council is trying to convince him to, hey, do things our way and blah blah blah, and Kirk's like, bite me. So yeah, this was and in the end, the like you said, the disgraced ship captain tries to right his wrongs, and he gets stabbed for it. So it's interesting. I did actually, when I was a teenager, write a little follow-up to this. I had an original crew set in the TOS movie era, so 20 years after this was set. On it, because I love that ship so much, it was set on that ship, and I don't remember all the details, but it was taking place, a mission taking place on this world after they let go of the Roman culture or whatever. And so I don't even remember the details of what my story was, but anyway, I liked this episode that much. I just thought it was super cool, and I did. That's one of the things I do love about TOS was the what if aspect of it. Like one of the very earliest episodes was Muri, where it was, what if there was a biological agent in the 20th century that made everybody immortal, but once they reached puberty, they died horribly. So it's just like, what if da 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 da. So I like that, and it's not something that's been employed by any other series, which is fine because it would be a tired trope if they did. You know what I mean? But
normally they do alternate universes at this point if they're going to do it.
Right, exactly, yeah. Which again started here in season 2 with the episode Mirror Mirror, and they've really run with it with the Mirror Universe. So it could be running with it even more so in Discovery with Tarka and wherever the hell he says he's from. But you know what? He could be pulling a Mysterio from the Spider-Man films. He could be making it all up. It could be
although
it could be the long con.
It sounded like he said that he was from this universe, but wanted to get to another one where the Emerald Chain didn't exist or some such thing.
Oh, right. Which, yeah. And so I don't trust him at all. So I think it's kind of a scam. But we're gonna find that out in February. So all right, taking us home. Final episode, The Backdoor Pilot. This would be episode 26 of the season. I just heard a snort. Backdoor Pilot.
Yeah.
This would be Assignment Earth, directed by Mark Daniels, story by Gene Roddenberry and Art Wallace, teleplay by Art Wallace. So again, Gene Roddenberry, that's 2 episodes. He didn't write a ton of the later episodes of the series, so it's somewhat significant when he jumps in there. Aired on March 29 of 1968. And again, Peter, you and I were talking about this earlier in the week. This employs one of the most nonsensical plot devices, which is summed up right in the sentence. During a historical research mission to 1968, We don't do that. Temporal Prime Directive, Department of Temporal Investigations. We don't do that shit. But the Enterprise encounters Gary 7, a human from the future who appears to be attempting to alter history. Enterprise is on a mission to observe Earth in 1968 when Gary beams aboard. When it beams aboard a mysterious man named Gary 7. I just said that. Why? Stupid. I gotta find better summaries. I feel so bad. I find this one website and they just write them really backwards. I need to do my homework better. I'm going to go through and rewrite these. I'll make that commitment, or I'll just do it on the fly. Who cares? Gary wants to go back to the planet's surface, but the Enterprise is unable to decide how to proceed. AKA, do we believe him or is he full of it? Seven tricks the guards and escapes and down to New York City, and Kirk and Spock follow him, giving my favorite incognito Spock look, which is that fuzzy brown hat. And isn't he wearing a big fur coat too?
I think so. Like, whenever Spock goes undercover, you either
so
have
bad.
like, oh, okay, or what?
No, like Spock in Star Trek 4 with the when he wraps that around his ear, so he looks like ninja guy. But anyway, so history suggests that on this day, a crucial spacecraft launch failed in the U.S. and changed the course of history. But Kirk and Spock fail to recognize that Seven is trying to help events instead of hurt them. Somewhere along the way, Teri Garr is in this as well. Using his secret portal, Seven is able to reach the launch site and install the device that will fail the mission, and Enterprise can safely return to present time. And this was, as we had mentioned, a proposed backdoor pilot to Gary 7 having his own show, which they're like, well, we read ahead on you, Mr. 7. You do a bunch of stuff, but we're not here to talk about that.
Yeah, it's a very strange thing.
It was a weird episode, and again, it did have more of a feeling of kind of a season finale. It was like, okay, there's something significant happening, and even though TOS episodes don't have that kind of connectivity, this really felt like, oh, they're trying to set something up, and they're going to break or whatever. So I don't know. It's a weird episode. Teri Garr is very weird. I get very much a laugh-in vibe from this, which is a show she was on at the time. It's just a weird episode, I would say.
There is actually a not a follow-up per se, but a continuation of
by John Byrne, who is one of my absolute favorite comic book creators. There was a series in the early 2000s. There was a miniseries that followed, in increments of years. Like, this is a year later, this is 5 years later, whatever it is. I love it. I've read it several times.
Yeah, no, I'm actually talking about something else.
Oh, whoa, please, by all means.
Yeah, this is not canon in any way. It's the same.
And neither is
the same fan production that I mentioned last time with the Bluegill. It's called Starship Excelsior. There's an episode that came out a year and a half ago called Nurturing Life, and they have someone acting as an agent on another planet, and so you hear all the goofy sound effects, all the references to the computer, and so like this has spawned a few spin-offs, but they're all kind of like tangentially related and have another Star Trek story going on.
Gotcha. Okay.
So it's fun though.
Kind of a weird one, but it's a fun episode, but a weird one all in the same. And again, it employs a trope in Star Trek that is never referred to again as, well, we just went back using the slingshot effect. We just went back in time, like like it ain't no thing, and it's very much a thing. So they kind of outlaw that for obvious reasons. So. All right. Well, in conclusion, this is the end of season 2 of Star Trek: The Original Series. Peter, on a scale of 1 to 10, if you were to balance the season as a whole, what numerical value, 1 to 10, Romulan ears, what will you give it?
I think this one might be an 8.5.
Yes, I agree. Definitely more good than bad. I would probably bat with like a 7.5, because while there are some really great episodes, some of the ones that really didn't work just really kind of dragged that down for me. But this did give us, again, some of my favorites. I love Bread and Circuses. I love the Omega Glory. Obviously, we had in earlier parlance, we had Mirror Mirror, and we had Amok Time. So we just had some of the really most, we had some of the most really memorable episodes of TOS. Yeah. But
then we also get Cat's Paw and
exactly. But by the time you circle back again, and we're talking about season 3 of TOS, which is going to be quite a ways down the road, that's going to be a hard couple of months for you and me. I'm going to admit we're not going to have a good time because
starting with Spock's Brain,
the undisputed worst episode of the series. So anyway, well, that's it, Peter. And if you would be so kind, I will first of all say thank you for joining me on this journey. This was a new endeavor after we restructured the show. You and I kind of came up with this format together. I appreciate you, letting Katie kind of step in and also be a voice on this while she takes your spot for the next couple of months. But yeah, you've been great. I've loved working with you, and I look forward to having you back when we jump into doing. Are you with me for Enterprise next? I've got it on the schedule. Anyway,
I'm on for Deep Space Nine, and
you're on for Deep Space Nine. Yes,
I'm one of those guys that likes Enterprise. I was a late convert to it, but I love it.
We'll do. Yeah, Katie. Just for housekeeping, Katie will be on, as I'd mentioned, for season 2 of Star Trek: The Next Generation, and then Peter will return for season 2 of Star Trek: Deep Space Nine, and then we'll kind of rotate back and forth. So, Peter. With that, thank you again, and please take us out.
For more information about Starfleet International, please visit Grand Petoskey and or Region 13 on Facebook.
Oh, but we don't have a name for the episode.
Oh, we don't have a name for the episode. Assignment Podcast.
Teri Garr is there for some reason. That's the name of it. Okay. Friends, with that, I'm going to tell you, as always, that sharing is caring, and to keep on trekking.
Peace and long life.
Code 47 is part of the Secret Friends Unite podcasting network. Visit secretfriendsunite.com for our great shows, articles, news, reviews, and more. Secret Friends Unite podcasts are available on Apple, Google, Spotify, or the podcast platform of your choice. If you would like to be part of the conversation, visit our new Discord server, or join us on Facebook, or follow us at Secret Friends U on Twitter. Please subscribe to Secret Friends on YouTube, and don't forget to visit our merch store at tpublic.com. Just search Secret Friends Unite. Thanks for listening.